Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this SAARC webinar on scheduling of wind and solar power projects. Thank you for taking the time to join this session. I am SN Javed, Program Leader at SAARC Energy Centre, Islamabad, and I'll be moderating today's session. Across our region, wind and solar capacity is growing fast, and how we schedule and forecast that intermittent generation is central to keeping our grid stable while making the most of this growth. Today's session will walk through the technical know-how of scheduling wind and solar power projects, the tools and practices used to forecast and optimize their output, and the regulatory framework shaping across South Asian member states and how to manage this going forward. A quick note on the format: you are welcome to send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the dedicated question and answer session following the talk. With that, I would now like to invite Mr. Abdul Rashid Jorokio, who is the Director of SAARC Energy Centre, for his opening.
Thank you, Asim. Good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this SAARC webinar on scheduling of wind and solar power projects. This event is organized by our center to build a shared understanding of how our member states can integrate growing shares of variable renewable energy into their power system reliably and cost effectively. As a technical arm of the SAARC Secretariat, our center has undertaken various interventions to promote energy security, foster renewable energy development, support rural electrification, enhance energy efficiency, and build the capacity of energy professionals across the South Asian region. The SAARC region represents nearly 25% of the world's population, and energy security and sustainability remain central to the prosperity of South Asia. Our member states are rapidly scaling up wind and solar capacity, and while this is a welcome and necessary shift, but it is also brings a distinct operational challenge. The output from these RE resources is inherently intermittent, and this intermittency, if not carefully managed, can create instability in the grid. Ladies and gentlemen, scheduling is one of our most important tools in addressing this challenge. Robust forecasting and scheduling practices help balance fluctuations in the wind and solar output, ensure a steady and safe flow of electricity, and optimize the efficient operation of the hybrid systems that combine wind, solar, and other energy resources. Today's discussions will bring together technical know-how on the overall scheduling of the wind and solar power projects and their optimization, and will introduce project developers, grid operators, policymakers, and researchers to the knowledge, skills, and tools needed to effectively manage the planning, execution, and operational phases of these projects. Dear participants, we are privileged to have us today distinguished expert Mr. Neil Bhara Paul, CEO of the Manikaran Analytics Limited India. We hope his insights drawn from hands-on experience with forecasting, scheduling, and grid integration practice in India will greatly enrich our understanding of the effective scheduling for frameworks for other member states of SAARC region. In closing, I thank you all for joining the webinar. I hope this webinar will be an interactive, and I would also request everybody feel free to participate in the discussions, share your valuable questions, and we'll be having questions from the participants also. With these words, I declare the session open. I wish you all the best for learning interactive session also. Over to SN. Thank you all again.
Thank you, sir. So I'll now briefly introduce our expert. So Mr. Neil Bhara Paul is Chief Executive Officer of Manikaran Analytics Limited, Delhi, a market-leading service provider in India's renewable energy forecasting, scheduling, and open access power trading space. With over 30 years of experience spanning industrial automation, smart metering, and energy markets, he has been at the forefront of India's RE forecasting and scheduling ecosystem since the inception of DSM regulations for wind, solar, and hybrid power projects. He has played a key role in developing ISTS QCA qualified coordinating agency aggregation as a service model, helping generators optimize power scheduling, with energy markets under India's evolving deviation settlement framework. His expertise directly bridges the regulatory and commercial sides of renewable scheduling, from open access regulations to real-time market integration for IPPs and large industrial customers. Mr. Paul brings a practitioner's ground level perspective to today's discussion on scheduling wind and solar farm projects, having lived through India's regulatory tightening firsthand as both a service provider and industry voice. Over to Mr. Neil Paul.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, gentlemen, for such a nice introduction. And when I was given a chance to speak in this forum, I was kind of thinking, where do I start? So what I did is something where we started as a journey in the RE space, so that if there are some Indian, the participants, they would be knowing a lot of this. But I think I'll take a liberty about telling how the Indian journey of DSM evolved over the years. What is the construct of the load dispatch centers, which takes the schedules and on the basis of which the entire grid is being managed. So I'm going to share my presentation right away. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. So this is what we understood, is that our journey is still we are doing. So it's like, as more and more RE is coming into the picture, we have to find out some new means on how we can regulate the grid. So before we starting, just a brief about Manikaran. Manikaran Group is has a lot of these companies which is into power trading. We are into forecasting and scheduling. We have a software entity which takes care of demand side management of our utilities. We are managing two of the state's entire power portfolio, and we have a small EPC arm which has almost done almost 100 megawatt of solar plant installation. And we also happen to have a 15 megawatt. There are three assets, 5 megawatt each, hydro plant. So as you can see, we are completely around energy domain. All the services that you can think around energy is mostly catered by us. We started our journey in Manikaran somewhere almost 20 years back. In forecasting and scheduling, it has been almost more than 10, 12 years where we have actually done so. This is a glimpse of what are the services that we are offering pan-India. As you can see, we are covering the length and breadth of the states. Wherever there is a renewable projects, we are giving services for them. And we have the highest, the market share in the forecasting space. And the accuracy of our forecast is more consistent than others, because the accuracy is what depends upon the IRR of the generator, because there is a strong DSM component that reduces their overall revenue. So this is just a glimpse of our operation room. This is almost twice the size of this room now. It has been expanded. In this room operates, operation control room operates 24/7, 365 days. It even operated during the COVID days, but the entire the building was sealed, but people used to live in our, the offices. We had made all the arrangements with them so that they can actually give the services, because it comes under essential services. We can't, even the government cannot actually, lock us up for not doing these services, because a lot of the grid is dependent upon the schedules that we submit. Now, coming to the larger picture of how our entire grid is there, we have a national load dispatch center, and then that is divided into 5 regional load dispatch centers. Regional load dispatch centers have under them these SLDs, which is the various state load dispatch centers. Now, regional entities has a connectivity which we call an interstate transmission system, which is at a very higher level, 220 kV, 400 kV and all, where there are renewable energy projects, which is separated between the two. There are ISTS-based projects which are connected directly to the RLDCs, and there are state-based projects which are connected to the state entities. So basic difference is that there are two different regulations that is applied. One is for the ISTs, that is the CTU connected or ISTs connected plants, which is managed by the RLDCs, and the one every state has it. So since in India, there are only maybe 30% of the states which has really a renewable each sites. So the regulations are only there. In the other states where the renewable energy is very less, the regulation has yet to come up. But we have got some states which has got upward of 10,000 megawatt. For example, you have Gujarat, you have got Tamil Nadu, you have got Karnataka. These states have more than 10,000 megawatts within this, right? So a STU levels can start with around 5 megawatt to 300, 400 megawatt, but ISTS level projects are generally minimum 50 megawatt, and it can go to a single project can go to as much as 1400 megawatt or plus. So this is an basics, so that in the later slides we would understand how the relationship between these various RLDCs come up, right? So we are proceeding. RE generation by itself is a variable. You do what may, it is dependent upon weather, and weather is known to changes. And in India, we have a grid frequency that we have to manage between 49.9 to 50.05. And for that, everybody is working towards to balance the grid compared to the injected power coming at any given point of time and the demand. So it has to be managed in the 15 block basis. Our entire 24 hours is divided into time blocks of 15 minutes. Within the 15 minutes, you have to manage the demand and supply so that the frequency is within this range. So this snapshot is from our UI portal where our generators get access. They can see that, for example, that the blue line is the schedule that we had submitted based on the various forecasts, but the actual generation is like, fluctuating. And these are something which is almost you can't do anything, because the mathematical models always gives a smoother curve based on the predictability, the probability of where it is going. Now, as I told you, how the scheduling is done, you have an NLDC, you have RLDCs, and you have SLDCs. The projects which are generators connected to STU is to SLDC, and the projects which are connected to the ISTS, the central grid, is connected to the RLDC. Okay. We had actually done leaps and brown leaps, and if you can see our journey, in 2014 we were only 35 gigawatt, and in 2026 we have almost reached 288 gigawatt, and with so much power, almost 50% of our installed capacity is now from RE. Obviously, their contribution of the power is still not that much because of the weather base. Their PLFs are always lower because solar comes in days, hours, and wind based on when the wind situation comes. But we have almost 23 to 25% of the energy mix is currently coming from green, which is a huge number. And more so of the solar, we have got a solar surplus during the daytime, which we have to manage. Because if it does not come, then RLDCs will have to take certain measures like backing down, curtailment, which is the last resort nobody wants to take. Mostly gone are the times when we have load sheddings. Right now, load sheddings are minimal unless there is a supply or a transmission corridor constraint, which is there in certain plants. I'll explain later. So this is the one. What is the problem is the RE variability has to be solved, and how we do it. They have a regulation in place which says that you have to do scheduling, and the scheduling is done based on the every regulators, every state regulators, the process that has been given, which you call as the implementation process, which comes with the load dispatch centers. Okay, I'll give you a brief about how it happens. What happens in India, every state which has a regulator, which we call state energy regulator, they come up with a DSM regulation based on their particular state's the handling their situation, the problems they are facing. And this regulation once comes, SLDC is the implementation agency, the load dispatch center, the state load dispatch centers. What they do is they come up with a implementation process, how this regulation will be implemented. It means that how many times you can revise your schedule of the schedule once revised. What will be the DSM charge to be collected from the generators? These all comes as a procedure, implementation procedure from the SLDCs. Obviously, what it attempts to solve is to have a enhanced grid stability, reduced balancing cost, and smooth running of the plants. I have covered most of these things. Now, let's start with how the DSM regulation came into picture. Now, I would start with the central CRC DSM regulations, because this was one of the started first, and the various states followed later. As we have so many states, I do not want to cover all those states too, but to give you a general idea about what is the how the thought process was when the regulation had come. They came up with a principle that any plant with for example, a 100 megawatt plant, if it is deviating plus minus 15% from the AVC, it means 100 megawatt is AVC. For 100 megawatt, 15 plus 15 minus deviation was permitted initially, where there would be no DSM entity. At that time, this was fine, because as you had seen, the penetration of RE was in its infancy in those days. Between 15 to 25, 10% of charges would have been applicable. For example, if you have a PPA of 4 rupees, any energy that falls between 15 to 25 would attract 10% of 4 rupees is 40 paisa will be implemented on this. Here on the right hand side, you can see a 50 paisa, because here is what happened is that initially when this regulation came, there was a two version. One version was for ISTs, which was based on the percentage of the PPA, because the PPA of every developer was different based on the time in which the bid results were declared. For the STU projects, they came up with a standard rate of 5 rupees. And on that, 10% was 50 paisa, 1 rupee, and 1.5. The energy that falls in these regions attracted these DSM charges, which is to be gets calculated by the end of the month, when it is all the schedule is compared with the actual generation. And every 15-minute time block, the formula below is being calculated. Actual generation in energy, scheduled generation divided by the total AVC. Okay. Now, what happened is that this regulation came into effect roughly around 2016. And from then, when more and more RE projects came in, it was becoming more and more difficult for the load dispatch centers to manage the grid, especially the central grid, because the central grid, which I mentioned, the regional grid, they have to manage the schedule between the state grid, state entity, and the regional entity. Now, if there is a deviation in the regional level, there is a deviation is to trickle down at up to the bottom, and that creates a challenge. So the CRC had come up with a more tighter regulation, which was from the effective was end of December 2022, when they said they tightened the band. And now over the years, they have tightened the band so much is that now even after 10% of deviation for solar, you will not get any revenue. For example, if you have a deviated beyond 10% under over injection, you will not be paid anything. And if you have under injected below 10%, you have to return back 200% of the based on PPA. So there is one basic difference between how the energy settlement or the DSM settlement happens in the ISTS and STU. You need to be a little appreciative about that. In ISTS projects, what happens is every payment of the generator is based on schedule. So for example, a project in Rajasthan is supplying power to somewhere in Tamil Nadu. Okay. So what happens is that if I'm giving a schedule of 100 megawatt at a certain 15-minute time block, they will get 100 megawatt divided by 4, which is 25 megawatt hour multiplied by whatever is their PPA rate. But if they have actually injected less, the settlement of under and over injection is done between the generator and the regional load dispatch centers. So if it is within the range, for example, as of today, we know that the band has reduced. For if it is within, say, 5% band, then what happens is that you have to only return whatever you have already received from your off-taker. So it is not a penalty because you have not injected, but you have scheduled more, you got more, you just return back. But as you go down, for example, if you are between 5 to 10%, then you have to return 110% of what you had received. And if you are under-injected below 10%, then you have to return twice. So when we saw how the DSM impact of the generators got evolved over the period of time, it started at around 0.3 to 0.5% maximum as a revenue loss. Now we are seeing in 2%, 3% and more. And the trajectory in which they are asking, which means that the denominator, which currently is the installed capacity, which remains same. So it means that you get a continuous band. I have some image of that. I think that will be very good to understand. How this is what was there before March 2026. You see this band for wind was 15%, right? So when you have a 15% plus minus, it means that if I have given a schedule, so the blue is the schedule, and the green is the band, which is an exemption band where if the energy falls, there is no penalty. You only pay something when you have under-injected, and only you receive if you have over-injected. You receive 100% if you are over-injected. For example, if you look at this generation, this is within the band. This generation was under injection. So in under injection, what is the gap they have to pay back? This is not a penalty because they actually received the revenue on the basis of this blue line, right? Similarly, when they have over injected, they will get receivable from the RLDC 100% of their PPA rate. But for example, in this instant, what happened is that they have over injected beyond 15%. So in that case, they will get partial, back up to 15 to 20%. They would get 90% back, and beyond that, they will not get back. But what is happening if you look at how for example, in the current year, the band has been reduced from plus minus 10% to plus minus 15% to plus minus 10%. It means that with the same level of forecasting accuracy, the DSM is increasing almost 2.5 to 3 times. And when we see what will happen in FY 31-32, it would be in the bottom where you have hardly any band available because the band is based on the 100% of schedule. If your schedule is less, your band is less. But a wind, for that matter, is capable to generate at any given point of time. So that is what the most of the generators are contesting, and this particular regulation, which was effective from this year, has been put on hold by the court, and we are expecting some of the there will be some hearing in the first week of August, and where it will be finally, because the generators are saying that such level of deviation is not feasible for them. They could have accounted up to 1.5% revenues, but with the revenue loss, when it goes to double digit, then it will eat up their entire IRR. and their lenders will be, chickening out. So why I have shown this particular image with this one is that for a forecasting company, our role is to predict as close to the actual generation. But a forecast always comes with a kind of a curve which is manually adjusted from time to time if we get some real-time input which is different from what is happening. But it can never match the actual generation based on what the current challenges are for the for implementing of the same. So this particular image is this to get an idea about what is the DSM exemption band. This is how it is getting reduced here, and where the formula was 100% of AVC, and now the formula was based on X percentage. X is if 0, then AVC is completely 0. Only 100% of schedule comes. I hope I am audible, and so far the session had been informative.
Yes, Neil, it's perfectly fine. I would suggest that you could close your camera because
Okay,
you have
okay.
a little bit delay sometimes. So at least presentation is running. Your audio is very clear. So video, if you want to close it, your choice.
Okay, okay. Let me do it. Let me do it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So right. So moving forward, what exactly? So the initially the DSM was for RE was also applied to the same as that of the general seller, which is a thermal seller, and whichever the seller which are dispatchable. But from 2024, the actual DSM regulation started, and this has been just a snapshot of how it went. Now, the DSM regulation, came up with a, a concept of qualified coordinating agency. It means that it identifies the QCA as a nodal or a state entity where a generator can take the services of the QCA to provide the forecast and the schedule on their behalf to the load dispatch centers in which they are connected. If they are connected in Maharashtra state projects, then my forecast and the schedules will go to the Maharashtra SLDC. So the is not only limited to forecasting and scheduling for their projects. We have to also be place to place. We have to also collect the meter data and submit to the SLDCs. SLDCs compare the data, publish the DSM report. We go through the DSM report, and if there is something wrong, we send an observation for correction. And when the final DSM is has come in the state level, we have to collect that DSM penalty from the generators and pay back to the SLDCs. So I explained last how the ISTS is different from the STU. In ISTS, what happened? The whole settlement is between the project owner, the developer, and the RLDCs. But in the state, the generators are paid based on actual generation. So there is no concept of payable receivable as such. So what happens at the end of the month, whatever has been the generation, there is something called JMR, which is called Joint Metering Report, where the representative of DISCOM unseals the meter, reads downloads the data, seals the meter again, and gives a report, which is signed. On the base of this energy certificate, they go to their off-taker. Their off-taker could be another DISCOM within the state, or it could be any private consumer, and invoice them. So all their revenue comes from the final generation. So whatever the DSM is the penalty, which comes after comparing the results between the actual and the schedule, which the QC is supposed to collect from them and make payment to them. I hope it's generally clear. You may put your questions down, and whenever we have a chance, we can discuss. So at any point of time, if you think that I should go fast or slow, please let us know. I'm fine with anything.
Yes, Neil, it's perfectly fine. You are going at a good.
Now, this role of QCA has been explained. As I told you, we have a CRC based, we have a SARC based, and all these done on a daily basis, 24/7, 365 days. I have to collect the data, I have to submit the schedule, and it is an ongoing round the clock process. It doesn't stop, right? So what is basically scheduling? We have a weather forecast, which we convert into energy forecast, and then what is the expected generation? We schedule it to the REMC portal, Regional Energy Management, portals, which has been developed since I think several years now, 3-5 years now. Otherwise, every SLDC used to have their own dedicated portal, which was sometimes not integrated at a central level. So now most of the states follow REMC. In the future slides, I will show how this happens. So broadly in India, we do give a schedule on a day-ahead basis. For ISTS projects, it is normally by 6:30 a.m. I have to give a tentative schedule of generation from 00 hours to the next 00 hours next day. And when the day starts, especially for the wind projects, I am allowed to make changes. Now, whatever important part is that when you make changes, when it comes into effect. When it comes to effect is known as the implementation period. The implementation period has been derived from the fact that how quickly the system can adjust to new schedule based on the ongoing demand. So in previously in ISTS projects, the implementation period was 4th time block. When you mean 4th time block, I'll explain. For example, if I make any changes of the revision. Revision means that whatever the schedule that you have given earlier, and you think that it has now changed because weather is known to change, I submit at 12 to 12:15 time block. It will be implemented from 12:45 to 1 onwards. So it means that whatever I make changes will be almost impact after 45 minutes. That was pretty good. Now what happened from the new India Grid Code 1st October 2023, the implementation time has been shifted to 7th time block. Now the reason being, there is that India has an energy market. It's a very thriving energy market, which has started in 2008 and has now developed to a very large scale. So what happens is the off-takers, which is mostly the discoms, they say that there is a product in the exchange market called real-time market. Okay, so this is a little outside information, but I think it will be helpful to understand the context. Several years before, there were only one product, which is a day-ahead market. So you have to bid on day-ahead how much you want to sell. The buyer is to bid on the market how much I want to buy. There was a price and volume matching based on which a rate was, which is called the area clearing price, was discovered for every 15 minutes. Now, after that, I don't remember exactly when the RTM was launched, maybe around 2022 or so. There was something called real-time market. Like every half an hour, I can bid how much power I want to sell or buy. That market operates on 6 time block scale. For example, I have to bid at between say 12:15 and 12:30. It will be effective from 1:30 onwards. So what happens is that because of the 2 p.m. onwards. Because of the 6 p.m., the difference between the 2 time blocks, the off-takers, which is mainly the discoms, they complain that the renewable energy forecasters or the QCAs or the generators used to make changes which was effective for 4 time block, and suddenly there is a shortfall of schedule. I am unable to buy because my real-time market does not allow me to get that information and buy, because whatever I buy will be only after 2 time blocks. So for them, what happened is the state load dispatch centers used to have a higher DSM. Now DSM is applicable for the state entities also, because they have to be disciplined towards their demand forecast, how much internal generation they are expecting, how much the schedule they are going to purchase from interstate. So because of that problem, they said, okay, the real-time market operates for 6 time block. Now RE implementation will be 7 time block, so that they get 1 time block to adjust if there is a shortfall or if there is surplus. A shortfall they will purchase. If there is a surplus, they will sell in the markets so that they can manage their DSM better. But that had a negative impact because it is like when you have a bullseye in front of you with a dart which is 6 feet, maybe the chances of hitting is much better. But as it goes further down and you are still expected to hit the bullseye, it becomes really different. So that led to one of the major deviations that we see today, because the implementation time has been shifted to 7 time log. It means that if I make anything from 12:15 to 12:30, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the impact will be from 2 p.m. onwards, which is quite further from the current situation. Now, how the schedules are submitted by QCA? The QCA submits the schedule in the REMC. There are 2 kinds of REMCs, which is the regional Renewable Energy Management Center REMC, which is state-based, and one is the regional-based. With the REMC, the RLDC and the SLDCs, they know that how much power will be injected from a certain period, so that they can dynamically match the demand of these states. For example, regional load distribution centers, they need to manage the grid at the region level. So they have got the demand and supply from the states, which they have to manage it from the generation that is coming connected to ISTS. So there are independent power producers, big producers who are connected to ISTS also, thermal producers also, and RE. The thermal producers are known to, is a dispatchable. You can dispatch as much as you do. It is the RE which creates the problem. And for the state, every state has got this REMC, on which it's a portal. It's a portal where you have got a login credentials given, on which we, based on a certain project, for if I have got say 1,000 projects, for every project I have to submit a schedule, and it has to be identified that it is the schedule for that particular project. Now, once the QCA submits to the LDCs, the REMC's data gets fed into web-based energy scheduling. This is a central, monitoring. It is a centralized monitoring, so that because that India is the one grid, is the single largest grid in the world. No other grid is so big as a single one. So this goes into the WBS, and in WBS we run multiple calculations, which is economic dispatch model, unit commitment model, and based on which we are managing the entire grid and the frequency. So this is how the forecasted or the forecasted schedule goes into and integrates into the central system, and where the NLDC has got the view of what is happening in the entire country level. If there is a certain large deviation at any one point of time, in order to save the grid, they can actually curtail, and this curtailment still happens time to time based on certain conditions. For example, there is a certain weather change which was not seen by anybody, and it had come, resulting in a gigawatts of difference in the power that is getting injected. In certain which they have to curtail that, back it down so as to save the grid. Now, forecasting, as you know, is nothing but how to we study the atmospheric conditions, we study the weather forecast for the region, convert it into the power based on the project capability, its size, the DC-AC ratio for solar, and for wind, how many turbines, what is the turbine capacity, what is the wind speed, and the power, which is based on the OEM power curve. So broadly, there are, you can see the forecasting is 4 types. NWP is the numerical weather prediction, which is mostly followed in India. Most of the forecasters follow that. With that and the combination of statistical approaches through AI/ML. Satellite-based forecasting is also used. This is used to understand what is happening as per every half an hour, 1 hour satellite data. Sky imager is a very short duration, which is not followed in India because, as I told you, our implementation time is very far. In Europe, I think the implementation time is around 15 minutes or 5 minutes, so that any changes that you can do is almost as a real time. But Europe is a smaller grid compared to India. India is a large grid, and the factors that is different from south and north is completely not aligned. It can be completely different. So you cannot apply a uniform to that rule for all of that. So what are the approaches? As I told you, ultra short term is the nowcasting based on satellite imagery. What we do is that we collect the satellite images, run through the cloud motion vectors, and come up with an understanding at how much time with the cloud is expected to come to the region where it can cast a shadow on a solar project. NWP, which is the best prediction model, we take it from various WRF sources and apply various statistical models to come up with that. These models work in tandem, but based on the real forecasting accuracy, the certain weight of a model becomes more than other. So a super forecast, or we call an Ansible forecast, is prepared, which is then gets submitted through a human layer. So we have a lot of people on our time because we also do a human correction. We have AI, but we see that a human correction adds to a lot of accuracy, because sometimes we receive calls from the site that there's a certain event which has certainly come up which was not forecasted. So, or if there is a shutdown. So in that case, we get this data and implement the schedule on the cases. So this is how the wind forecasting basically is run: atmospheric observation, data assimilation, initial condition, boundary condition. Then that wind speed data that is come, it is cleaned because all this data is not correct. After which we process this data, the AI/ML models enhance the accuracy. Our idea is that whatever there is the inherent inaccuracy at the regional level, because when we get a the numerical weather prediction for a site, it is mostly a grid based. So it could be a 12 kilometer grid, could be a 25 kilometer grid, maybe less. So the projects which are closer to the grid gets the weight based on where it is. But what we have is that we have a data which is we received on a hourly scale, which we have to divide it into a 4 slots of 15-minute each. And that is the work which is done in the behind, how to convert into the power. This is solar, as you say, it's weather forecast, data preparation, cloud movement. Then we forecast GHI. Then we do the scheduling, get a feedback from the site that how much right or wrong we are, and make the continuous adjustment based on that. Now is the time, or I wanted to show what are the challenges normally faced, because why the deviation sometimes becomes unmanageable, because the data that we receive from the various weather sources is very stale. None of the weather sources are able to give a better than that. We get almost 4 updates in 24 hours, like every 6 hours. But for example, in this particular condition, if for a 0 UTC, I am getting a data after 6 hours, in which almost 6 hours of the period has already passed, and I'm expected to schedule for 1.5 hours. So all this is based on the data, which is almost 12 hours or more than 12 hours initial condition. So as you know that when a weather source makes a data, it takes the input from the global input and then creates a initial condition based on which the forecast is created. And that is the basis on which our further forecast at a site level, at a hyperlocal level, is made by us. Okay. This is some of the challenges which comes in the solar and wind forecasting, as I informed that, yeah, so they are very variable. Certain images is not covered smaller plants. Cloud movement is complex. I'll show some example about how, for example, this you see the dynamics of cloud movement. You see this picture on the 26th of December 2024, the clouds appeared suddenly out of nowhere. this is the major problem which we see in Indian or the subtropical region that we have, that because of the inherent surface heat, the cloud formation, convective cloud formation happens, which is not predicted by any solar models or any weather models. So, and then if you see it is coming and disappearing completely. And there is another one I would like to show here. Here the cloud is coming from the west, which sometimes we call it as a western disturbances. But in that day, what happened is all the cloud that came from Iran to Pakistan, and then it actually disappeared by the time it hit India. But we have to forecast based on what we see is on the happening this. But in the next day, what happens? The same cloud that happened, but it stayed on and impacted largely in the Rajasthan area, which led to a lot of grid disturbance. Almost within a few time blocks, I think if I remember correctly, 6 gigawatt of under injection happened, and the frequency dropped drastically beyond that safe limit. So these, and none of the weather forecaster, none of the QCAs were able to predict, because it was not, ultimately you have to dependent upon weather forecast, and weather forecast agencies, they have access to supercomputers, they have access to satellite data. If they are not able to, give this data, we as a forecaster can only do, much. This is a wind classically. So in wind, what happens is very terrain specific. If you look at this two cross section, just because of the angle, if you see this, there is an angle. This is a line. This line has got this, variability of the height. So when we get a frequency, we get the wind speed data on hectopascals basis, which we have to correct based on the surface, what you call sea level correction. But when you have such a up and down, it becomes inherently difficult to understand what would be the final speed that will be applicable at that particular turbine. All the green dots that you are seeing are the turbines. So what we have come up with, a clustering method in which we are doing a clusters of the turbines which are together or the similar height, and applying the logic based on it, based on the coordinate of weather forecast that we get. So on that way, when we sum those coordinates up, for example, for a large project, there could be multiple clusters that are individually forecasted, and they are summed up before final schedule is submitted. Now, what happens is that there has been talks with this the schedule. The DSM regulation getting tighter. It is leading to a level where we are saying that beyond which it is incrementally difficult to reduce the deviation. So some of the generators are considering why not put some BESS into it. Now the problem is, for existing site where the financial closure and everything has happened, coming up with a new investment is a problem. When we studied the BESS sizing, we saw that if you put a bigger the battery size, of course you can reduce the DSM, but the ROI of the battery will not come. As per our study, for a say 300 megawatt project in Rajasthan, about 4.5% into 2 hours means almost 30 megawatt hour, 28 to 30 megawatt hour battery if you put, and if this regulation of X factor comes, you can save as much as only 20% of the DSM. But if you are allowed to sell the power in the evening, in the peak times, as you know that we have a peak time which is around evening, starts around 6 p.m. to 10 or so, where there is everybody turns on their air conditioners. The entire country's energy demand peaks at during time. So at that time, if the regulator allows to sell this, then we have come up with a feasibility study that will be able to do a break even in 7.5 years time, which is good enough because we expect the battery is best to survive at least for 12 years, if not more. So we have done this kind of studies. And now what is happening is that there is a new draft that has come up that from 2027 onwards, any bids that is happening on a larger projects will be treated at par with a general seller. General seller are the generators who are like you have what you call like thermal generators, which can be power can be schedules or a big hydro. So they'll be compared with that. So it means that you'll be not be allowed any deviation. If you're not allowed any deviation, then your battery size has to be increased to a largest, maybe 100%. 100% means when you talk about 100%, it means that if I have a 100 megawatt project, when 100% means that I need 100 megawatt, then for how many hours it amounts to? If it's 2 hours, 4 hours, based on we multiply. If it's a 100% 2 hours, it means that you need a 200 megawatt hour battery for a 100 megawatt project, so that the most of the power you are able to charge on the batteries, so that you can practically know how much you can schedule at the to the grid. So with this, we have how the BESS plugs into existing plants that we have. There are two things how BESS can connect. There is something called DC coupling, and there's something called AC coupling. DC coupling is very costly, but it is more what you call in a longer run it is better, because you normally put a higher DC size plants. In fact, right now we are seeing DC to AC ratio is almost 1.6 times. 1.5 is become a norm. It means that for every 100 megawatt connected AC project, you are putting 150 megawatt or 160 megawatt of DC. Why you do so? Because then you are able to generate more energy. You have got some clipping loss of about 2%, which means that you're even at around 10 a.m. or 10:30 a.m., you are able to hit a peak, and you have got a flat till 2:33 p.m. of the energy. So it works out better because you are generating more energy. But since there is a clipping loss involved, what happens is that if you have a DC coupling, then you could have actually charged that there and have more control. But you have if a project that is already ready, you need to have a BESS, which is AC coupled, because it can be integrated within existing projects, and it is comparatively cheaper. But energy arbitrage is a condition that if the Indian regulator does not allow, the feasibility of a BESS will not be there. So we have these kind of contracts like FDRE, fixed dispatch renewable energy, coming from last few years, and they are getting live now. FDRE is a kind of where what happens is that a DISCOM or will give a 25-year demand profile, which can go up and down for the entire day, and a generator has to bid that I will match this 80% of the time. So they actually come up with a much higher capacity so as to match with some storage, and they are allowed to sell the extra on the exchange. So this has to be given to the normal projects also, so that their deviation gets reduced. So the key takeaways is we have to start early, and I think India has been the very fine model which can be replicated, which can be studied and be adopted in the countries where you have started this RE journey. And as you phase up, you have to standardize, you have to create a concept of similar to a QCS, or there is an entity who does so. Normally generators who are not capable of doing forecasting, because it's a completely different domain expertise, and you have to use the pricing and obviously a market. If it comes, that will help to balance this. Design the storage, calibrate your grid. I think I've covered it. I think all these are the basic concepts. I'm open to any queries. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Meet Paul, for an excellent presentation. You have rightly covered all the aspects of DSM and scheduling of these RE projects. So we'll quickly go on to our dedicated question answer session. So over to the participants, if there is any question you would like to ask Mr. Neil Paul directly, we would give you the mic. You can just put on the raise hand your software, and then we can ask you to ask the question directly from the call. Otherwise, you could also write us on the chat box, and we could ask the question from your from Nepal. So we have 2-3 questions up till now. So Nepal, one question is that with India's DSM deviation bands tightening further from April 2026, for example, 5% for solar or 10% for wind, what practical steps can IPPs and developers take now to improve their forecasting accuracy and avoid any revenue losses?
See, the avoiding a revenue loss is not possible, because what we are going against is the mathematical calculation is the culprit. When we say the forecasting accuracies, the weather forecasting accuracy has not kept pace as we have wished we should. We have done improvements in our models for converting that weather forecast and the the site level data to make a better forecast. But unless we have some of the constraints are removed, for example, my implementation time should be back to 4th time block, which is more nearer to real time, so that if I have a real time data from the site, which is giving an overcast signal, I can make immediate changes. These are the things that will help, and the regulator should consider this to be one of the things. Ultimately, increasing the DSM penalty, the RLDCs are not here to make money. They are here to protect the grid. And for the grid to protect, we need to identify the technical challenges, and based on that, the regulations should be changed. Secondly, when we say that how the DSM is getting reduced, in ISTS projects, we have got one of the several GSS where 3-4 gigawatt of projects are connected to that. The concept of aggregation came a couple of years before. It was allowed from October 2024, but it came effect from January, where we were the pioneers, and currently we are running almost 13-14 aggregation across the state. What it means that previously every generator of 300 megawatt, 400 megawatt individually has to give a schedule, and their DSM used to come individually. Now we are allowed to aggregate. It means that I have got 4-5 projects of starting from 1 gigawatt to 3 gigawatt capacity, which their entire schedules are summed up, and there is compared with the total generation. What it helps is that it averages out a lot of things. It helps in reducing, because what happens, for example, there is a cloud cover is moving, and certain plants are getting impacted, but the other plants are not getting. So the plant, they get the AVC, I mean the denominator from the other plant, which is not deviating, and overall the deviation had come down. So we had seen in the last 1 year, there has been 40% reduction of deviation, 30 to 40% just because of a concept of aggregation. So these are the means where, so all the generators I connected to ISTS are keen to join the aggregation, and we are doing almost now 19 gigawatt of aggregation across 13-14 GSS, which is called grid substation for wind and solar across the state. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. So another connecting question is that given that other member states, including Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, who have renewable energy projects on a grid level, they don't have dedicated DSM style deviation settlement regulation. So from your experience serving IPPs, what are the most common technical or data related mistakes generators make in their forecasting or scheduling that led to penalty exposure?
Okay, so what is see, as a QCA, I can tell, like if the generators are not communicating or giving the real-time status of their plants to us, we are almost playing on the dark, in the dark. So every forecast we make, we are doing error correction based on what is exactly happened or what is the real-time condition. So the generators who are able to provide the real-time data through SCADA, through FTP, API, or OPC, those generators have actually done their bit to give us all the tools that we require to improve the forecast. So we have seen some generators who are not able to provide this data, and then they complain. I said that it means that any changes that I'm doing, I'm actually only following the weather forecast without any feedback. Feedback is important for us or any forecaster to do a better forecast.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question in the chat box. What is the role of money current LDCs, discom and generators? And what is the fee charged from either discom or generators for forecasting?
Okay, so Manikaran is a QCA. We are doing forecasting and giving forecasting and scheduling services. So forecasting scheduling services arrives on a rupees per megawatt basis. For a larger plant, it is smaller. For a smaller plant, it is larger because the effort kinds of becomes same. But the smaller projects can afford less, so we do not, we know that. So, and then there is something called aggregation services, which is over and above. So all that is we charge from the generators who are expected to be compliant with the regulation. Unfortunately, we do not get any payment from SLDC or RLDC because it is actually we are solving their problem. But the regulation is made in such a way that the all compliance requirement is for the generators to fulfill.
Thank you, Meet Paul. So another question more relevant to member states with a huge generation from hydro sources like Nepal and Bhutan. So the question is, many member states rely heavily on hydropower and are now adding solar and wind to the mix. What specific coordination challenges arise when scheduling variable renewables alongside a hydro-dominated grid? And are there lessons from hydro-heavy states within India that would apply?
Okay, so in India, there is no specific DSM regulation for hydro. Hydro is considered at par with a general seller because largely hydro is dispatchable. You know the height, you know the flow. You can correctly predict most of the schedule for hydro. Some of the run of the river becomes a problem, but even by understanding how much it is coming, you are able to predict the hydro more precisely. So that's why there is no DSM per se requirement of DSM per se was needed for hydro. Hydro is largely manageable. Now what we are seeing. What we are seeing is the hydro used as a pump hydro. It means that used as a storage. There are a couple of one plant is already live. There are a couple of already there where you can actually schedule the surplus power and the pump it will go back to the storage, and when required you can do. So pump hydro is an interesting case of a storage because it has got an expected life of 40 years, where a BESS system will have a limited life. But the problem with pump hydro, it causes little disturbance to the environment. It takes many hours to come up with that, but it is a long-term solution, especially for storage for multi-hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, which battery BESS normally does not do. Yeah.
So, okay, Mr. Bhaskar.
Tandon.
Tandon, like
Hello, Mr. Dil, thank you for your excellent presentation. My this question is that with CAC recently coming up with the proposed maybe regulation or draft of reducing the time block for the real-time market to 5 years. So if this is implemented, how the scheduling will for wind and solar will impact in real time?
Yes, understood. Thank you. I didn't get your name, but I understood your question. See, what happens is that if you reduce the implementation time, what we are expecting that maybe the RTM will get reduced by 4 time block, up to 4 time block. If it happens, then my RE schedule implementation time will be reduced to 5th time block. We cannot do direct comparison, but we see that the forecast improvement will be at least around 20% because I am closer to the real time.
Okay. We have a question from Jinesh George. Does a prototype wind turbine have any exemption from scheduling and DSM?
No, the prototype, it is not there because we have seen a prototype of some one big company who have were trying out their 5 megawatt wind turbines. So they were also subject to DSM. Yeah, you cannot escape the DSM. No.
So another question from the perspective of member states who are initiating on the renewable energy journey. So since India has been implementing these DSM regulations for a decade now, so you have quite a lot of experience in that one. And since that was a kind of a evolutionary step which member state India took. So what would be your advice to the member states which are starting from scratch today? Should they go for phased approach as India did, or they should just leap forward to the more matured and developed format which India has already developed now after 10-15 years of experience in different mechanisms? And what capacity building would be required for those member states?
Okay, good. The thing is that, see, what happens is initially when you do not have a market in place, I think what you can do is that you can start giving schedule. So what will happen is that the practice of giving schedule will start. So every day, every 1 hour, you can start that every plant should give their schedule, and that schedule will be going to your load dispatch centers or whatever the thing that you call your LDCs. Now in other markets it's called TSO. So there will be some discipline that there somebody is looking after. Now when we see over a couple of years time that how accurate or their schedule are, the next step you can start with the penalty mechanism. I do not suggest that you directly go to the the 2026 regulation that we are proposing. It will be too harsh to begin with. You have to start a journey which is closer to what we have done in 2014, so that at least a discipline of giving schedule, not just like anything, comes. Once this comes, you can slowly tighten the the bands going forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Neil. Any other? So I think, Neil, we are over with the question answer session. So we would like to close the webinar now. So with this, I would like to bring today's webinar to a close. Thank you all for joining this session. We have excellent presentation from our distinguished speaker from India, and I hope you all have found the discussion useful. The presentation, the video link of this whole webinar will be uploaded on our website. I would also request Mr. Neil Paul to share his presentation with us. Plus, on top of that, if you could share the DSM regulations if they are openly available for the consumption of member states, we could also upload it on the website or any relevant data. We also welcome your suggestions and feedback for improving future sessions, and as well as any topics you would like to conduct more webinars in future. With that, I would sign off. Thank you again with us today, and I look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar. Thank you very much, Neil, for your excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. It was a nice experience, and it is very good because once we have done a journey, it helps. It's a humanitarian thing, the experience. If it's helps others to come, we are very much keen to help others because we have seen certain challenges we know. So why do you have to go through the same challenges? You can learn from us, a leapfrog to an extent, which helps you stringent your kids and makes more, disciplined. Right.
I think rightly said, Neil, and we would definitely invite you in our future activities. And plus, we would like to have some training session for member states from your side in future. Thank you very much again for participating.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again for. Bye bye. Thank you for all.
Bye bye.